Scott just made the point.
Jefferson, you'll read to be a lot more secure, not just.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to You Be the Speaker. You know, according to the U.S. Constitution, the House of Representatives chooses its own Speaker of the House, as we've seen recently, but Freedom's charter holds no requirement that the House Speaker actually be a member of Congress. Well, I'm PJTV's Scott Ott, joined now by Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. In this week's three-part trifecta, Bill, Steve, and I are each going to comprise a trifecta Speaker of the House and lay out our agenda for the 114th Congress in areas of basic governance, foreign policy, and communications. Now, men, a lot of Democrats and establishment Republicans, but I repeat myself, say the big challenge for your speakership is proving that Republicans can compromise and govern, which is apparently a new requirement since for the past 6 years, Democrats really had to dominate and rule. So, Mr. Speaker Stephen Green, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there as far as opportunities for compromise with Democrats. Trade agreements, modest tax reforms, slight changes to Obamacare. Are you going to embrace the opportunity to restore civility and have perhaps a Botox summit with Nancy Pelosi to prove that Republicans can govern?
Well, my first act as Speaker would be to restore the old tradition of fistfights and cane whippings to the House floor. I think that'd be a big step forward for good governance in this country. After that, though, to answer your question simply, no, I would not. Normally, I would say yes. You have divided government. The object is to find areas of agreement, to compromise, to accept half a loaf. But we have a different occupant in the White House. This is not Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton in the 90s. This is whoever the House goes for. And right now, the anti-Boehner vote is up to about 15 as we tape this on Tuesday morning. We have Barack Obama, whose mission is not to govern, it is to destroy the GOP, and the GOP should act accordingly. So if I were Speaker, I would continue to budget based on these idiotic continuing resolutions, because as the economy grows, slowly, not as much as it should, but as the economy grows, government spending is becoming more of a reasonable percentage of GDP. It's down to about 20%. It needs to get down to about 17, 18, but we're on a glide path to that right now. And you're not going to be able to negotiate with Obama. That's not what he is in the White House to do. So you keep budgeting with the CRs, and you let federal spending continue to decline as a share of GDP. The rest of the time, you set booby traps for this guy behind the Resolute desk. You send him bills with popular support and force him to veto, and you shut the Democrats out in the House. You shut the Democrats out in the Senate, just like they did the Republicans in 2009 to 2011. The attitude is, I won, and I'm going to act like it as your new Speaker.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, he doesn't even have the gavel in his hand yet, and already he has a Nobel Peace Prize nomination. Well, Mr. Speaker Bill Whittle, people are tired of the do-nothing Congress and exhausted from the partisan acrimony of the past 6 years. Will you now pledge to let bygones be bygones and swear off staging public battles over Obamacare or probes of Benghazi, Fast and Furious, the NSA, IRS, VA, ABCD, EFG? In other words, will the healing begin, and will it begin with you?
No. First of all, let's just go back to how we phrased this question in the beginning. When the Democrats are in power, it's a mandate for change. When the Republicans are in power, it's hope for civility and compromise. And so let's just get this clear. Before we go any further, I'd like to point out something that really just seems so obvious that no one really mentions it. I found out about a year ago, Scotty, somebody said, I'm going to nominate you for Speaker of the House. I said, I don't want to run for Congress. He said, you don't have to be a member of Congress to be Speaker of the House.
That's right.
And the term is not President of the House. The term is not Leader of the Majority. It's Speaker. And this is, I think, the thing that the Republican Party has been missing forever, is when you say the person who's the leader of the House of Representatives is the Speaker, presumably that means he's a person with rhetorical gifts, the gifts of persuasion through argument. John Boehner is not a real Speaker. So I would say, to answer your question in terms of policy, my job as Speaker would not be to hammer out the nuts and bolts and the rivets of the details. That is, in fact, a place for actual compromise among actual representatives to knock out the basics of how bills are actually put together. But I think my job as Speaker would be to state pretty plainly what the principles the Republican Party stands for and what this country stands for, because I think they're the same. And if it turned out that a certain piece of legislation was well within that and we could find Democrat support for it, I'd go after it. If it was something that was opposed to the founding principles of this country, I'd be against it. And the whole idea of rhetoric and persuasion is to keep it simple. So what do you Republicans represent? What is it you guys are about? Well, they're about big government and we're about freedom. Does this bill advance American freedom or does it restrict American freedom? If it advances it, I'm for it. If it restricts it, there had better be a unbelievably, blindingly good reason for it. And that reason needs to be made available to the American public because we are, in fact, a representative democracy. So I'd go straight to the American people and say, do you want to understand our metric for whether we approve a bill or disapprove a bill? If it's increasing the freedom of the American people, we're in favor of it. If it's decreasing the freedom of the American people through regulations, taxation, or whatever, we're against it.
In our episode 3 of this 3-part trifecta, we'll go even deeper into that communication strategy. If you're not a member already, you may want to hit that subscribe button now. You know, there's a football story about a referee watching a player who's doing an elaborate end zone dance to celebrate his touchdown. And the ref approaches the jubilant player and quietly says, "Son, why don't you act like you've been here before and you plan to come back?" As the Speaker of the House, I'll make sure that legislation gets careful scrutiny by the members of Congress and by the public. I'll work to minimize showmanship and general phony political posturing. I won't stage a fight just to please the base, and I won't run from one just to keep the establishment donors or the Democrats happy. People are not sick of the do-nothing Congress, and they're not tired of politicians who stick to their principles. The American people are gripping the porcelain throne, hoping to vomit out the vitriol of a political process that serves no one but the so-called public servants and their cronies. Solid principles and good governance practices will chase the weasels from the arena like a flashlight scatters cockroaches. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the entire Trifecta crew at pjtv.com, I'm Scott Ott.